Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the role of insurance companies, and any sort of service or physical job of work that's covered under insurance. Now, insurance in certainly the Western economies, you've probably heard of the West. The whole West now is, because they've been hollowed out with manufacturing and so on, is referred to as fire economies. What does that mean? FIRE: finance, insurance, real estate. So those are the big three sort of profitable type areas. And if you look at insurance company profits, they have absolutely gone through the roof over the last few decades. Similarly, if you look at, say, in the case of medical insurance or medical services paid for by national insurance or by government programs of one sort or another, those providing services such as testing blood or heart testing or any services delivered to the medical industry, you'll notice those organisations are also realising absolute bonanza profits and long-term contracts with government or to some sort of subcontracting entity that in turn is contracted to government. Huge profits. Now, when they lock in these long-term contracts, you immediately can see how they move to a very low-cost model of employees. So they're paying their employees the minimum of the minimum wage. Somebody who say medical staff that extract blood for blood testing, they can be getting paid less. Remember, they've got to stick needles in you, pull blood, and do all this. They get paid less than somebody, delivering pizzas or working in the corner grocery store and so on. So this is something that these are the lowest of the low paid on a very lucrative long-term. The company's got a lucrative long-term contract with the government, and they're charging big bucks. And so they've got cheap premises. They've got cheap employees. Everything's done on the cheapest of the cheap. And so their profits are absolutely astronomical. And on a relative basis, these are the most profitable businesses in the country by far. So let's have a look at what's happening in the insurance game. Now, insurance used to be, insurance. It was the purpose of insurance was if you, it could be a motor vehicle collision or something like that, or maybe, I don't know, a storm comes along, a tree falls on your house, or those of the insurance would cover it now. But the situation has changed, and it's become now a money laundering scheme, and one that is there. The purpose of it is to disperse funds and monies to favoured groups, to patrons, goons, stooges, hangers-on, and so on and so forth. So that's really what I'd like to look at in this essay. Now, let's take a relatively minor job in a house. Say there's a plumbing leak in the house, like some internal wall. Then the plumbing, the pipes break or split or whatever, degrade, and there's a various leak, and it causes damage to the wall, and it causes damage to the floor, maybe the pipes, and so maybe the damage isn't vast or extensive, but it's nonetheless, it's not that cheap to do. You've got to have plumbers and carpenters to replace the wall, maybe the floorboards or some of them have got to be replaced, and so it's not a big job. It could be done in a few days if everyone got on with it. But these jobs drag on for many months, not because there's complexity, a lot of work to be done, or something that requires super specialist expertise. None of that is involved here. But yet it once the insurance, it's an insurance job, that pulls a trigger, then unleashes vast arrays of people and remediation companies and all sorts of folks getting involved, and all of them want to get a payday. They all want to have a payday, and so insurance has been transformed into delivering a payday to the patronage groups, and they're all involved in various, I would argue, corrupt relationships. And so a case insurance job, it's a small job, but an assessor has to come out and spend a few hours looking at it. What's to look at is anyone's guess. It's not a very big job. The area involved is only a few square meters. You're going to fix the plumbing. There's a few square meters of floor. There's small part of a wall that needs to be replaced and cut out, painted, maybe a few, a couple of square meters of floorboards. Bang, that's it. The job could be done in 2 or 3 days. But that's not how it works. It has to go through a process, and that process is how the feeding frenzy is distributed and dispersed as a form of patronage. So a specialist company of assessors has to come out, and they had to be paid, and they're paid $150 an hour, and it's effectively a whole day travel time to and from. The guy's there scratching his ass for hours on end. What he's looking at, nobody knows. Taking some photographs, looking very official, making notes on so on and so forth. So that's a junior assessor. But then a senior assessor has to come out and check the work of the junior assessor. So that's a second layer of assessment. And that senior assessor comes out again, a few hours. That's a more expensive. That's $220 an hour. So already you've clocked up a few $1,000s really just on the assessors coming out to inspect the work. So the assessors are now being paid, just those 2 assessments is as much as the work to be done. Really is. So then someone comes out who estimates the work to be done, and they say, well, it may only be a couple of square meters of floor, but we're going to have to replace the whole floor in the whole house. A lot of people need to feed on this, and they have various policies. We have to get an exact match with the floorboards. So if the floorboards don't exactly match, then the whole floor has to be redone. If we can't get an exact match on the paint, then the whole house has to be repainted. If we can't do this, then the whole universe has to be done. So they have these various policies and protocols that trigger vast expenses and vast amounts of work, none of which needs to be done. It doesn't need to be, that's not required. None of that needs to be done. So, but this is the process. Then someone else has to come out and then do an inspection or do a qualification of the estimate that's done by the remedial, and so on it goes. And that's another company. And there's another company comes in to check on this company. Then another organization comes in to ensure health and safety protocols are being maintained. And that takes a few weeks to go through all that at various rates per day. And various activities are taken and monitoring machines that are there, all of which are very expensive. Just this monitoring machines are $50 an hour, but it's there for a week, 24 hours a day. And then again, more thousands of dollars of costs to generate quite unnecessarily. It's producing, achieving, and accomplishing nothing. But supposedly it has to be done. So in the end, half a dozen businesses that subcontract to another business that get guaranteed work and a guaranteed minimum amount of work. And this involves each party making thousands of dollars or being paid thousands of dollars for doing work that's not needed or unnecessary, but apparently or allegedly meets some sort of policy protocol and so on and so forth. Now, when these, it's the policy to do this. Okay, can I see that policy in writing? If it's a policy, it must exist in writing. Can I see that policy? What do you mean? What are you saying? I can't hear you. What did you just say? And there is no policy. This is all bluff and it's all made up, but it's designed to generate billable hours and revenues, none of which is necessary as soon as that wider insurance umbrella is there. So a job that, if I went to for example, if you just went to a local place and said, look, I'll get a plumber and I'll get a carpenter, or I'll get all that, it would maybe, I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000 to do the whole thing. But doing it the insurance company way, it comes to $30,000. So this is the difference that I'm talking about. So you can look at a multiplier of 8 to 10 times on what it would actually cost to really do that job, because there are so many people trying to feed off it and so many people trying to make money out of it, and they want guaranteed money. So they have corrupt relationships with the insurance company or the master assessors or whatever you want to like, and that money is then through the insurance money laundering scheme is then dispersed to these favored groups, but it's not in any way needed or necessary. So it's again money laundering, super unproductive work, vast sums of money being spent on work, again, up to 10 times even more money than needs to be spent on the basis that it's somehow necessary under some strange and unique and very strangled form of logic. Now the same can go for motor vehicles. I remember getting a couple of jobs done when I was younger on motor, just to replace minor, fender bender type stuff. So I was getting work done there, and it's very direct. The panel beaters, the guy fixing the car would say, "Look, it's gonna, I can do the job for $500, but if I do it through insurance, if you want to claim through insurance, the insurance company has to come out, they have to assess, they have to prove." Then someone else has to come. Then there has to be this, and you have to go through a series of protocols, some of which are understandable. But instead of limiting or controlling possible fraud or wastage of money, they're actually facilitating the wastage of money. So the guy says, "Well, if you go through insurance, I can do the job in a week and $500. But you go through insurance, it's going to take 3 weeks. You're going to have an increased insurance premium. You're going to have to pay." Part of that that cost is going to be, you're going to have to pay that, and so on and so forth. So what do you want to do? That's excuse me, that's all completely changed now. Nobody wants to do a job that isn't through insurance, because there's so much money laundering and fraud and disbursement that goes on. So this is something that and now when you look at, say, medical insurance, and I've had some exposure to this. Just people I know and so on. The medical insurance thing is similarly a huge scam. So, say the doctor, the general practitioner doctor says, "Well, you might have a problem with I don't know, your heart or something like that," and they'll send you off to a specialist, because the general practitioner can't do this. They'll send you off to a specialist, who's, say, a heart specialist. The specialist then said, "Well, you need tests." Now, this is where the fraud starts to come in. Already it's a fraud to some extent, because the general practitioner that used to be able to make these decisions is now just someone that just distributes out the work to the specialists, and so they're part of the fraud chain. Or the chain of fraud. So the specialist gets the win. Now the specialist has to then decide which tests you'll do. And there may be a series of 10 tests, for example, for checking for your heart. And they'll set you up for a program where you have to go through each individual test. Each one may be a week or 2 weeks apart. So the traveling to, and each test is done, you then have to go back to the GP, then back to the specialist, then back to the GP, and back to the specialist. So you can walk through the whole range of battery of tests. Any patient can be walked through it. And if it's a senior retired person, senior citizen on a pension, then the government is paying for all that. So that's an insurance scheme. So once that insurance scheme is invoked, then the cost is irrelevant and costs balloon out of control. And they can walk, you can be walked through, any patient can be walked through each one of those 10 tests, each one generating fat revenues for the companies that supply those testing procedures, testing equipment. and those companies are making, again, bonanza profits. But are they delivering services that are actually needed? Why aren't the tests being selected to best suit the patient's circumstances? Because the specialist is taking the view, well, I don't know exactly what the problem is. You have to do all those tests. That'll tell me. Well, then what the fuck is the specialist there for? Why can't the GP do that? And so there's many layers of cost and supposed service that are built into insurance schemes. Again, be they medical insurance or anything else. And the sole purpose of this, they transform very, very quickly into money laundering schemes where parasites leech off the government payments. Now, let's take X-rays as one example. Pretty much all the X-ray chains around Australia, at least, are now all owned by Indians, and offshore Indian companies have bought them. How are they allowed to do that? And nearly all the people working in them are also Indian. A few Chinese, but mostly Indian. So these were places that used to offer an actual service, a necessary service on demand, and so on. And they employed only local, white Australians. Now you're lucky to find any. They're all Indian. Now I'm not saying they do a better or worse job, but they're quite clearly part of the scam of looting the Western taxpayer through these insurance schemes. And so the looting process through insurance is vast and it's broad. The danger now is that as mass migration, which has been around for a bit but picks up, these insurance schemes are being given for free to the mass migrants who overuse them and who come with many health problems, things like that. And they very quickly, and NGOs, I think, put them up to it. They very quickly work out how they can additionally and further loot the system, which they do. And the Somalis in Minneapolis and so on are a good example of that. And the government is in Australia to hands out millions of dollars to Islamic and Arabic groups for what they call social cohesion services. And where the fuck does that money go? I mean, seriously. So this idea of insurance delivered through insurance, health insurance schemes, the idea of insurance has been completely corrupted, and it no longer represents actual insurance and has become a money laundering scheme. The danger here, though, is that Western governments increasingly wanting to protect the mass migrants with insurance scam type money laundering, while saying senior white citizens in Australia or the UK or anywhere else, well, why don't we take away services for you in order to give it to the mass migrants? And this is not something that we ever voted for, agreed to, or asked for, but this is the direction it's all heading. So insurance will be, I think, ultimately denied to white people in the West, and be solely focused on funding the illiterate peasant mass migrants from the third world. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.